Welcome into another episode of Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. This is Let's Rage Coogs basketball. We're coming off the heels of the University of Houston men's basketball team's season opener, and what a dominant performance it was for the Cougars. They just flat out, in lopsided fashion, dominated, like I just said, the University of Louisiana-Monroe, 84-31, the final score from the Fertitta Center on this Monday night in the season opener. Emmanuel Sharp looked great. He had 20 points, 5 of 9 shooting from the field, 4 of 8 from his threes, or on his threes, and Damian Dunn on his regular season Houston Cougars debut overall period, shines with 18 points, 5 of 8 from the field. He had a stretch there where he seemed to be on fire from the floor when he came off the bench for Houston. And overall, a nice performance top to bottom from the Houston Cougars. When you beat a team by that such of a lopsided score, obviously there's going to be a lot of good things that you did well, but I'm impressed. I'm impressed. There's a comment from Miles Coleman. Final four bound. This is a very impressive performance. That the seat is high for this team. Dan, I'm curious to get your thoughts.
I mean, the ceiling is definitely high. I'm definitely impressed. One thing that stood out to me weirdly was the defense. I think the versatility, the way they'll be able to guard on perimeter, be able to switch a lot more than what they normally do, and being able to really keep the ball in front of them. And then offensively, I really like what I've seen. I think outside of LJ really didn't shoot the ball well, but I know what he's capable of doing. But Emmanuel really showed me that he's been working on the offseason, not only just being a knockdown shooter, but being able to attack the closeout and being able to make a play. He did that on numerous of times, attacking the closeout, be able to get inside, finishing through contact, or going all the way and finishing with a layup. So that's something on the scouting report. A lot of teams are going to run him off the three-point line. Him being able to attack that closeout, and whether it's to get a mid-range or get all the way inside, is going to be key all season. So I like that. What I seen from him and Jamal looked like Jamal, and so I was definitely impressed.
Rex32 on YouTube asks, is this the best defensive game in UH history? And technically, no, but it's been a really, really long time since the Houston Cougars dominated an opponent in that fashion. You have to go back to 1951. So, again, a very long time when the Houston Cougars held Texas A&M to just 29 points way back when. The 31 points actually ties the third fewest that an opponent against U of H has ever scored in a men's basketball game. So not necessarily the best defensive game in UH history, but pretty dang close. Miles Coleman also asked, any way too early projections for this team, ceiling floor for this team? Oh, I think there's definitely a overreaction Monday projection. This is a Final Four bound team. Overreaction Monday based on the performance today. Obviously, UL Monroe, quality of opponent. They're projected when they showed on the TV on the ESPN Plus broadcast that UL Monroe is projected to be the bottom of their conference. But the reason I say that, this team is much. They're deeper. They're deeper top to bottom. They're legitimately 10 deep, and it's going to be exciting to see how they continue to develop. This is barely November 6th. Imagine what they're going to look like a month from now. Imagine what they're going to look like 2 months from now, and as the season continues to progress.
Yeah, that depth definitely sticks out to me, and the versatility with that depth, especially on the guards. Damian Dunn stood out, and he really showed his full offensive ability scoring wise. He didn't really even show his playmaking ability, in which he can do that as well. But offensively, he showed his full game. He can spread the floor and knock down, catch and shoot threes. He can also isolate the mid post, in which Kellen Sampson talked to me about in that interview. Is they're going to isolate him in that mid post, allow him to post up smaller guards, and use his ability to post up and score. And we saw that tonight, to where one time he faced up and did a step back fadeaway in the mid post and made it. And the other times he was able to draw fouls, in which that's something he does really well. And so I think Damian Dunn is going to be a really key piece. But on the game, basically, like Coach Kelvin Sampson said after the game. I mean, one game it may be LJ, another game may be Jamal or J1. And so I think we're going to see that throughout the year, and even Emmanuel and Terrence. But I think overall the depth really spoke volumes, and the way that they're going to be able to play. A lot of four-guard lineups, or the floor is going to be really spread, and Jamal is really going to have a lot more room to be able to penetrate. And that pick and roll with him and JVA is really going to be key throughout this season as well, I think.
Come on, I want to share from GoCoogs.com, courtesy of Ryan of GoCoogs.com. This is a quote from Kelvin Sampson that he just said in his presser following Houston's big victory over UL Monroe. He says, November is a comma month. March is a period month. Guys get better. That's what November is for. So he's not going to get caught up in the impressive performance in today's outing from Houston against University of Louisiana-Monroe. Michael Jones says he's worried about rebounds or about rebounding. He's curious to get our thoughts about it. That's interesting. Honestly, I am not as worried. In fact, I was kind of encouraged because, in particular, we know Jawan Roberts is going to be a rebounding machine. You know what he's going to bring to the table night in and night out. I think you can put Javier Francis in that same category. I was encouraged to see Ramon Walker not only be back out there on the floor, but in the minutes that he had, he tallied up 7 rebounds and tied Jawan Roberts for the lead in the game. It's good to see him back out on the court after he had to redshirt last season.
Yeah, it was good to see him back out there. He looked healthy. It looked like he was been working in the gym. He actually made it through. But as far as like the reboundings and his tenacity on the defensive end and the energy he plays with, he still had that edge to him on the floor. So it was good to see him out there as well. I was happy to see that. And then other players who you just mentioned in the comment, what was it that you just brought
He's
up?
worried about rebounding. I'm curious to get our thoughts on if we're worried about
Oh,
rebounding.
yeah, I'm not really worried about rebounding. I think this team will collectively be able to rebound collectively. I think J1 is still will probably lead the team in rebounds, but I think collectively um, they'll be able to rebound. I think it'll be a challenge with LJ and Jamal because they're both smaller guards. And so I think the others will be able to step up and really dominate the glass. Because often, although it being with this opponent, Houston was really chasing after and around all those loose balls. So I think that's something that we'll see throughout the entire year.
This is an interesting stat that just stood out to me. It was actually shared on X, formerly known as Twitter. But Tuxin Coog again, on that platform says that the guards alone outscored ULM. And when I think about it, Jamal Shed, 5 points. He had 8 assists. He looked really good in his role. LJ Cryer had a flurry late in that second half or towards the middle of the second half where he had 9 points. Manuel Sharp, 20 points. Damian Dunn, I don't know if you can put him as a guard, more of a wing. He had 18 points. And again, just top to
A wing
bottom,
as a guard, Andy.
a top. But when it comes to him, whether they're playing him at a forward position or if they're playing him at a guard, but again, top to bottom, just going back to the depth, they look phenomenal. They look great, top to bottom from the depth. And that leads me to the next question from Miles Coleman. Do you believe that this could be the deepest UH team under Kelvin Sampson?
I think it could be. I think the other team probably that I could think about was the COVID year team with all the players that they had. I think from Dejan to Quinn to Marcus to I believe Caleb and Nate Hinton and I don't remember who else I'm missing, but that was a pretty deep team as well. And so I think this team definitely could probably be probably the deepest team. I think Kellen said that it's the deepest amount of guards that they've had, and so and I would agree with that for sure.
To add on to that point, not only when it comes to how deep it is, but the experience too. You look at LJ Cryer and Damian Dunn; those are veterans. LJ Cryer was on the Final Four team for the Baylor Bears, a national championship team for the Baylor Bears. Damian Dunn's been around, been with Temple, played a significant role for the Owls. Jamal Shed, he's a senior. Jawan Roberts, a senior. Javier Francis, a junior. Again, top to bottom. Ramon Walker, he's a junior. He played a significant role as a freshman during Houston's Elite Eight run in 2021-22. Emmanuel Sharp, second year, he played significant minutes last year for Houston as a freshman. Terrence Arsenal, you can fit in that same category. That coupled with depth, I think that's why there's a really, really high ceiling with this team.
I would agree with that. And those core players that return, like you just mentioned, all have experience. And now it's like Coach Sampson is saying, it's about getting experience together and stacking these days up and getting better month by month. I think, and that's what we'll see them do. I think you see them continue to play with different lineups. I think we see some comments or will Damian Dunn be a starter, in which at Temple, he and Battle was the two best players, and both of them ended up coming off the bench. And so that just shows his willingness to be a team player there and still know that he can still contribute, whether it's coming off the bench and who it matters who finishes game. And so I think often we'll see that. We'll continue to see a lot of four guard lineups, but this depth, I think it will still be something. It will be very impressive to see how multiple ways that they'll play and the different styles that they'll be able to play because they have such unique players that all mold well together.
On the topic of Damian Dunn, and this was something that was touted by Kelvin Sampson when they announced that he was going to be transferring to Houston, his ability to get to the free throw line. He got to the free throw line 9 times, made 5 free throws, missed 4, but still that ability to be able to get to the free throw line 9 different times. I think outside of Tremont Mark a season ago, there wasn't really a player that Houston had that really found an act to being able to get to the charity stripe.
For, definitely. And when I was watching it, I was actually that's what I was thinking. He's going to be able to be that player that can, when the game slows down or they may be missing shots, because often you have games where the team might just be off and he can be that player you can isolate and he can get to the free throw line, maybe settle things down and see the ball go in from him. Or maybe if he's having a game, however the game may be. But it's definitely to have that player to have that inactability to be able to draw fouls. And what he does is he gets in that mid post and he beats you with that move instead of fading away like a lot of players do. He pump fakes, and if you're not disciplined on that, he draws to be able to lean in to get that contact and get to the free throw line, and he's strong enough to finish through contact. And so I think that's something we will see because they will continue to isolate him in that mid post and give him those opportunities to make plays for himself.
Yeah, that was a couple times. It reminded me of the old Kobe Tracy McGrady pump fake, and he got the defender, like you said, they were undisciplined into the air, and that was a big reason why he was able to get to the free throw line as often as he did. Now, when it comes to not necessarily a newcomer, but again, one of those other guards that had a really strong performance, Emmanuel Sharp, he hit 4 threes out of the 8 that he attempted. 50% from the 3-point line is obviously a really good percentage. But again, another aspect for him, he's more active when it came to being able to be a driver, to being a driver. And again, he found a way to get to the free throw line 8 times, which is a aspect in this game that he did not have or he did not showcase a season ago with Houston. And through one game, he was able to do it really well.
Yeah, that goes to the point I made about him earlier, attacking the closeout, and that's drawing leads to more contact and getting more to the free throw line. He's one of the team's better free throw shooters, and so that's good. But his jumper still seems more quick, but he was really active on the defensive end. I was seeing at times with the way that they like to play pick and rolls, he was able to get out and force the ball back into the double team and play coverage really well and keep the ball in front of him. And so I can tell overall he's been working. He looks slim down a little bit more. I'm sure Coach Bishop has his body transformed like he does with the rest of the players. But I was very impressed with Emmanuel. Not surprised with him being in the starting lineup because I think what he brings to the team with that spacing and his shootingness, along with the continued development of adding the ability to attack closeouts and create off the dribble, is only going to make him even a more potent offensive player.
Kind of wrapping up when it comes to the new additions for Houston, LJ Cryer, he had 9 points in his also regular season debut for the Houston Cougars. Didn't necessarily shoot it lights out, just 3 of 13 from the field. But again, that flurry in the second half, I think that shows the potential. You're not going to have to worry about AJ Cryer having a bad shooting night on a consistent basis. And again, that just goes to show the potency of this Houston Cougars offense, just this Houston Cougars team, period, because there's still a lot more. Imagine a night where Jamal Shed, LJ Cryer have it going. They don't necessarily have to rely on one player, where I think at times a season ago, it was kind of Marcus Sasser, Jarvis Walker, and then who else is going to be able to step up? There's multiple guys. It could be Jamal Shed on one night. It can be LJ Cryer. It can be Damian Dunn. Going back to the point, you could obviously add Tremont Mark to that list, but I think it's much more where there's legitimately 5, 6, maybe even 7 players on this team that you could make the argument on any given night could catch fire and they could take the load, carry the offensive load. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's similar to last year. I think I would agree with last year at any moment, any player. And that's really the coach that Kevin Sampson throughout his years. He has multiple players that on any given night, if any player has the hot hand, they will feature that player. They will isolate you. They will give you the ball and let you get busy. And so that's just like the system and like he's played throughout this entire year. So I don't think I think with the depth, they have more players that could do that, but the likelihood of those players doing that consistently it's only a handful of players, just like it was within recent years. I think LJ is one of those players, and Jamal is another one of those players that you can count on consistently night. And I would put Damian. And I think Emmanuel is showing that ability, and he will show that he could do that for a consistent basis. As well, and so I think that's three or four players, and I think on any given night, Terrence can do that, but I don't know if he's ready yet to do that on a consistent game-to-game basis. And so, they just like years past. And I think that's a credit to Coach Sampson and the program and the entire staff and how they've been able to recruit and build players for their system and allow them to have the freedom to know that if it's your night, we're going to feature you.
Let's put a pin on it real quick. Kris Gardner, who is at the Fertitta Center, will be joining us here shortly. But like to remind everybody that might just be tuning in that this is Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian Family. Let's Rage Coogs, the unofficial the unofficial and original Houston post-game show of football and men's basketball. Of course, we'd like to say thank you to the Saxenian Family for being the primary sponsor of today's episode. Of course, we also like to say thank you to our secondary sponsor, In Star Pizza, with multiple locations across the Houston area. Star Pizza is your go-to stop, before or after the game. Be sure to visit them online, where not only you can order ahead of time, but you can check out their menus to see what pizza you're in the mood for as you head to your closest Star Pizza location. Digressing back down, just any overall thoughts when it comes to, or any final thoughts on the guards as a whole before we kind of focus on the front court players and their performance in today's season opener?
I think early on, Jamal just wanted to mention that his ability to read the defense, I think, really stood out. I think one time when they went under the screen and they knocked down a three, and I think that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on because that's how defenses will challenge him with that type of defense going under the screens and seeing if he can knock down those threes at a high percentage, in which I think he can. And I know it's something he's been working on the offseason. So him being able to do that, it will be a key for this team all year as well in regards to guard play.
On that note, kind of taking a look at the front court in particular when it came to the starting 5 and 4 in Javier Francis and Jawan Roberts. Let's focus on Francis first. Again, entering his junior year with Houston, this is kind of the first year where he's gonna be relied on a consistent to have a consistent starting role. Starting today's game, had 9 points, 3 for 3 from the field. Actually had a really nice shooting percentage from his free throws. Not only was he 3 for 4 from the free throw line, but his form looked really good on those free throws. Had 4 rebounds, did commit 3 personal fouls, only played 18 minutes. What are your thoughts on Francis's performance in Houston's opener?
He looked more confident and more assertive, especially when he caught the ball in the post. One time, instead of just kicking it out automatically, he did a power dribble and used his strength to get position and draw a foul and get to the free throw line. And so he definitely looked more assertive and looked more confident in himself. And I think he's ready to take that next step. I think with more minutes, more experience, we'll continue to see his game grow. But him and Jamal's pick and roll, I think, is going to be special. So we're going to see a lot of alley oops, a lot of highlight dunks between those two and no pick and roll action. I think all year his ability to dive and catch the lob, and Jamal's ability to put pressure on the defense and force centers to come and help because he's so quick and can get inside and can finish. And so I think that's something he's going to keep an eye on. But I'm excited to see him continue to develop. He looked really good in his minutes in game one.
He was also the player that scored the first points for the Houston Cougars in the 2023-24 season. Like you mentioned, Dayon, a very potent or potential when it comes to how they use him. Very dangerous player when how they use him in the pick and roll. I'm certainly going to be something excited to see for the course, exciting to see over the course of the entire season. Now, his other front court mate in Juwan Roberts, who played the four, transitioned back to being the four. Again, he was tied with Ramon Walker as the leading rebounder for this game at 7 rebounds. He added in 6 points, 3 or 4 from the field, played 23 minutes. Seemed like he might have gotten hurt towards the end of the second half. Hopefully, it's nothing too serious. Didn't seem like it was from the way he was on the bench after he took a spill. But what you think of Juwan Roberts' performance here tonight against UL Monroe?
I think just a credit really to him. I don't want it to sound negative, but it kind of sounds like a typical J1 performance. I mean, tough heady. You're going to get those rebounds, and when he catches the ball in the post and he gets to his left hand, he can't finish, and he's going to attack the glass and to try to go get those rebounds. And so I like what I've seen from him. I think as the season goes on, we'll see what he's been working on over the years and see him even be able to space the floor and be able to knock down mid range. But I think from what I saw from him, he's going to be able to bring that leadership, that toughness on a game to game basis, especially rebounding as well.
And when we're talking about front court players, of course, we cannot not talk about Joseph Tugler, who made his freshman debut, his collegiate debut at the regular season level for the Houston Cougars. Only saw 12 minutes of action, picked up 3 fouls. He picked up 2 quick fouls early in the first half. Not necessarily anything eye-popping, but he's a freshman that the Houston Cougars are really high on, and he potentially, as the season progresses, I think he's one of those players that, going back to the comment that Kelvin Sampson made post-game about there being November being a comma month, there's certainly a lot of commas when it comes to Joseph Tugler because he has the potential there. His ceiling is high to potentially only continue to get better and better and be a contributing, not only a contributing player, but a key impact player for Houston as the season progresses. To in between the stretches of Javier Francis and Juwan Roberts.
Yeah, limited minutes. He had 6 rebounds, and so that shows you about his motor. And when he was on the floor, he was everywhere. His athleticism really sticks out, and struggled with foul trouble tonight. But like you said, like as the season goes on, we'll see more and more from him. And I think we see a lot of big games from him, a lot of highlighting plays. And I can't wait to continue to get to know him as a player because I've only seen so much. And so I don't really want to give too much of critique, but you see bits and flashes from what I've seen. His athleticism and his motor really stands out from what I've seen so far.
Oh, his motor definitely. I think in the ESPN Plus broadcast they mentioned how, or it actually might have been. It was in your interview with Kellen Sampson, actually, if I'm not mistaken. When it comes to Joseph Tugler, and he mentioned he has a positive nastiness
Yeah.
about him, and that's the perfect way to describe him. When in the limited stretches that I've seen him play, in actually going back to the inner squad scrimmage that they had before they even went to their trip overseas to Australia. You could see it in bits and flashes. You could see it again a little bit in their exhibition game. That motor, man, you can't teach that motor. He's just going to continue to find a way to make impact plays. It kind of worked against him in this game when it came to that foul trouble specifically. But again, like you pointed out, 6 rebounds in his limited amount of time. You can't teach that. That's something that he just innately has. And again, it's going to be very, very exciting to see how he continues to progress over the course of the season.
Definitely. I think like just similar to what J1 does as far as attacking the rebound and being infectious to the ball of Justin Gorham, those type players. I think JoJo will have that type of impact on the game, and he has that type of infectious to the basketball and that type of ability just to be around it and go get it.
Most definitely. It looks like we are about to be joined by Kris Gardner of the Houston Monroe Review. But before we do, I'd like to remind everybody that this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. Let's Rage Coogs, the unofficial and original Houston postgame show for football and men's basketball. Of course, like I mentioned, big thank you to the Saxenian Family for being the primary sponsor of today's episode. Of course, we'd like to say thank you to Star Pizza for being a secondary sponsor. Star Pizza, with multiple locations across the Houston area. Star Pizza is your go-to stop before or after the game. And on that note, we welcome in Kris Gardner from the Houston Round Ball Review. Let me move you around a little bit, Kris, so that you're not covered by that sponsorship. How you doing, Kris?
Doing great, guys. How y'all doing?
I'm great. I'm good.
Oh, really good.
So, what has been the tone from the crowd, the audience so far on this edition of Let's Rage Coogs?
Final four bound, Kris. We're Final four bound.
I like this team's versatility. I really like the guards, the wings, the defense. Malik Wilson getting after it. See his potential. Deion said it a few times last season. Ramon Walker's presence, you can really tell what Ramon could really provide this team with his hustle and the scrappiness and getting after it, rebounds, all those things that kind of lacked a little bit last year. The front court, the bigs, is inexperienced.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a reason why I think more times than not this season, you'll see the Cougs go one big with four wings / guards, whatever. But JoJo's got potential. You see, rebounding is just natural for him. He's got to learn the offense. Coach Sampson said in post game that JoJo a couple of times was not in the right spots, things like that. Freshman first game, all those things. ULM scored 31 points. That's hard to do, man. But 31 points. I mean, Cougs defense was locked in. ULM is not a very good team. Read about that too, but you could see the potential with this Cougs team defensively, and I think that should get fans excited for this season.
Yeah, Kris, the first time since 1951 that U of H had held an opponent to 31 points or fewer in that case. In 1951, they held Texas A&M to 27 points. Go ahead, Dan. Were you going to add something?
No. I was just shaking my head in agreement.
Question for you. Well, a couple comments, Kris. This is an example of the mindset from our viewers that are tuning into today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs. El Guapo on YouTube says, I think this might be Sampson's best overall team from top to bottom. I could see us going all the way this year. He's not alone in that sentiment. There's a lot of optimism for this Cougars team after, again, just one game, not to be overreaction Monday, but there is a lot of positives. Miles Coleman on YouTube asked the question, is UH deep enough in the front court to be competitive with teams featuring star bigs? I think, Kris, you kind of indirectly answer the question when it comes to the potential the potential is there. It's just a matter of how quickly, how much experience those front court players are able to get over the course of the season.
That's the question. I mean, that's the thing that they lack, inexperience, and they need said lot to just get some minutes of production so it can be a fourth big body in case it's necessary to bang, bruise, things like that.
And also, I think with the way that they play coverage post players, I don't. Houston will never allow a dominant post player to beat them one-on-one with the way they double team the post. And so I think the depth, they have enough players, like Kris is alluding to, in regards to their experience. If they continue to gain the experience, they'll be able to impact the game more. But I think that the depth is there to be able to defend teams that have a star player like Kansas with Dickinson. That's one player. And when he catches it on a block every time, Houston is going to double team in it. And they routinely done that under the tenure of Coach Kevin Sampson with their blitz defensive coverage.
And the thing that Hunter Dickinson separates him from a lot of bigs, he's a very good passer out of it. A lot of bigs, they see the monster and they don't know what to do with it, they don't know how to react to it and all those kind of things. But this team, this Cougs team, I'm sure you touched on a little bit. LJ Cry, Coach Sampson said it in post game. LJ Cry is the team's best best shooter. It's a fact. But tonight he just missed shots. The Cougs offense, Coach Sampson was very happy with the offense. The looks they got, they missed a lot of them. He said offensively, execution was very good and just missed shots. LJ is not going to go 0 for 6 from 3 to start a game. More time than not. But this team, Damian Dunn, is not a great three-point shooter, but it's in his bag. Plus, getting to the free throw line. Emmanuel Sharp is a three-point shooter. LJ Cry is the best three-point shooter. Malchia can make some. This team may have a lot of different three-point weapons this year that recent teams haven't had for the Cougars.
And to add on to your point, Chris, something that Kelvin Sampson told the ESPN broadcast after when he did the I guess the stream interview, not the TV interview, but to add on to the point, he feels like the buy-in is there at such an early stage for the program. He said that that's promising, and again, he seems to be very very high on this team early on. Again, for November, I'm sure we read one of the quotes that was tweeted out by Ryan of Go Coogs that Calvin mentioned that November is a comma month. There's no periods in November, but when it comes to that Bayern specifically, that's a big comment because again, it just shows how it seems like Calvin Sampson's really high on this group of individuals overall as a team.
And take it for what it's worth, and fans of the Cougs and followers of Coach Sampson know how he is, and he's very hard on his players and teams and expectations. But already before today, he said this is a good team. He said during post game, we got 10 good players. He used 10 guys in the first half, and he was asked if that was more because of it's early in the season or how deep this team is. And he was honest, probably because it was his first game of the season, but we do have 10 good players. Ramon Walker is the Cougs' 10th best player. Remember, Ramon's on a Final Four team, almost Final Four team his freshman year as the only guard coming off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's one of the last players coming off the bench this year. This team is very deep, just lacking experience up front. And I say all that, they're still going to lose games in the Big 12 because of the Big 12 being that good. So let's not act like this team's going to go undefeated and all those kind of things. They're going to lose games in the Big 12 and still be a very good team. Okay, let me be clear on that.
Definitely. I think that's a great point. That's something that we touched on before you hopped on about depth. This is a team top to bottom that, again, barely the first game of the season, but you're really, really high on because of the 10. I agree with Kevin Sampson. They're legitimately 10 deep. We haven't even talked about Terrence Arsenal. We haven't talked about Malik Wilson. We know what Damian Duncan did off the bench. LJ Cryer, like you just alluded to, Chris, didn't necessarily have a good shooting night. Jamal Shed didn't necessarily was asked to have to do the scoring load. He was able to be much more of a distributor. There's just so much, especially when it comes at that guard wing position, that it's exciting. The ceiling from an outside perspective seems to be relatively high.
Agreed. And with Emmanuel Sharp starting instead of Damian Dunn, Damian came off the bench at Temple. He just seems more comfortable coming off the bench and being instant offense for this team in a different way. He made some threes, but he also, with the old man pump fakes, ULM bit on that a lot. He went to the line. There were times last season, and even some previous Cougs teams, you would wonder who's going to get them easy points by going to the free throw line. That's Damian Dunn for sure on this year's team.
Most definitely. Now, Chris, when it comes to you being at the post-game presser, was there any other comments that stood out to you that Kelvin Sampson said following Houston's 84-31 victory over ULM?
He wasn't. I think the question was for Emmanuel Sharp, and so it was off. I mean, all three, Coach Sampson, Damian, and Emmanuel, all were Mike, sitting in front of Mike, so we could all hear it. So Coach Sampson said to Damian, "You ever been on a team that only allowed 31 points?" Damian said no. And then Coach asked him, "Man, how'd y'all beat us last year?" So things like that. I mean, this team, the non-conference schedule is not the toughest, but the conference schedule is going to be tough. And I'm looking forward to how they compete, how this team evolves. I asked Damian, I didn't ask him about his points. I asked him how he was adjusting to his defense and Houston defense. And he said it's still an adjustment for him. He's still getting used to Cougar defense. He made mistakes. And he said himself, defense is a standard here. That's what he said. It's not so much culture anymore. It's the standard. It's demanded. Defense is demanded here. And I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah, and your thoughts on that?
Not surprising because I mean we've known that Coach Sampson to get on players to not defend. If you don't defend in practice, you won't be able to defend in the game. And so I'm not surprised with that. But I just love, like I said earlier, what he brings, not only offensively and scoring wise, but his versatility and be able to score on all three levels. But I think he didn't even have to show his playmaking ability. That's something he could really do as well. But he's a complete offensive player as regards to scoring. He can spread the floor and catch and shoot. He can score off the dribble. He can score in the isolating the mid post. And so I think not only that, with his experience and his ability to be able to slow a game down when the game does slow down and get to the free throw line, do those type things will help this team throughout the year. I think he'll be an X factor throughout this season.
And I think Damian, with this team, Jamal, LJ, Damian, Malik are four different kind of guards, but they can all run the offense at some point. So that spreads the load, shares the load. You don't have to have one player get too tired, run the offense the whole game. So I think that could be a benefit as well going forward throughout this season.
And on the topic of defense being a standard, Houston, again, how dominating of a performance it was. They forced ULM to commit 25 turnovers. ULM only had 31 points and they only had 39 shots. So, again, just goes to show how dominating of a performance it was. In particular, one player that we haven't touched on so much, Kris, you mentioned earlier, Malik Wilson, who offensively, they're not counting on Malik Wilson to put up offensive points. They have him in there to be defense, like you mentioned, in terms of potentially even also being able to run the offense in brief stretches. But he had a good moment where, again, there was that stretch when Houston went on the run in the first half and they just broke open the game, where there were possession after possession, there was one where Malik Wilson was guarding one of ULM's players, and he literally forced him to dribble out of bounds when he drove a baseline. I think the following possession after that, they forced a shot clock violation. That was the suffocating. That's the only word that really comes to mind in terms of how impressive of a showing defensively that today's outing was for Houston. And again, that's something that they did really well and only creates more optimism, more potential for this Houston Cougars team.
Agreed. And Coach Sampson said he wants the guys to play faster. He wants them, once they get steals, to push up the floor and score, get those easy buckets in transition. And Malik can really kickstart that offense with his defense. This is a different kind of team, but we're seeing he played well in Australia. You could just see the glimpses of him, and he hasn't missed a beat coming off the injury to his left hand. That defense, he excels defensively. He's going to be a good help rebounding from the guard spot, push up the floor as well. Just different facets of the game, different ways for the Cougs to attack teams this year.
And not only does he bring those attributes that you guys are speaking of, I think offensively, he's one of those guys that I mentioned that on any given night can lead Houston in scoring. I think that offensive ability, he does have that ability to get past the defenders and get inside and finish with those floaters and have a nice mid-range game, and has that athleticism to finish through contact and be able to finish at an efficient rate, getting inside and collapsing the defense. And so I think that just goes to the overall depth of what we're mentioning as well. But I think he will be one of these key X factor players that have a big year. Most definitely.
Kris, what are your thoughts on JV Francis' performance in this game?
He was better. He's still learning the defense, learning the rotations. It's one thing I asked, I guess the last question of the presser, I wanted to get Coach Sampson's thoughts on everybody wearing the 32 on the jersey this year, in memory of Reggie Chaney. And one of the things Coach Sampson mentioned was they show clips to the bigs how to defend and position yourself on the screens, whether high screen, angle screens, everything like that. Reggie Chaney is the person to watch and learn from with the footage. So I think JVA did a better job of that. JVA still needs to do a better job talking on defense, but he's getting better and he's reacting more. He's quicker to his reactions on defense. there were times last year. And of course, he's younger, and I realized this. He's only been playing basketball since he was 13. I
Oh,
think he
wow.
just turned 20. So
7
7 years.
years.
That's it. So he's finally becoming, getting more and more comfortable as a basketball player.
Yeah, that's interesting. Still very young when it comes to experience from the game overall. 7 years is not a lot, especially for now what they're asking him to do as a starter here at the University of Houston. And again, like you said, the level or the standard, going back to what Damian Dunn said, that they demand from their players on defense certainly has to have been still an adjustment period for JV Francis. What about Jawan Roberts? Because what are your thoughts on how he performed in today's game?
He did what he does.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to do a lot of different things. When there was one big on the floor and it wasn't him on the sidelines, he was coaching the bigs like JV or whatever to be in position where he's supposed to be. Though he was a coach on the bench sometimes. You can still see he can get it done on the block if necessary. Just different ways. This team is more versatile. They're deeper and they're experienced in certain spots, just not at the backup big spot yet. They'll get that throughout the season. But non-conference wise, it's a chance for the guys to learn, get better, iron out some kinks, and get ready for Big 12 competition.
Funny that you say that, Kris. Is literally the exact same words that Dayon said when we talked about it early. Did what Jawan Roberts does. Any closing thoughts on any one of the other players or anything that might have stood out to you from being at the game today in Houston's 84-31 victory over ULM?
I just like the potential defensively of this team. I really do. I think fans are going to get a kick out of this team scoring easier buckets because of their defense.
I think because the athleticism of the defense and the aggressiveness of it, like Kris is saying to his point, they'll be able to create more highlighting, more easy transition buckets off the defense.
And length too. They're pretty lengthy, especially top to bottom when it comes to the wings and guards. Go ahead, Dayon. Were you gonna say something? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I just no, that's it. Yeah, I agree.
Overall,
And they look bigger. Emmanuel Sharp looks stronger. Jamal looks stronger.
oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Andy, you are correct in their length is going to give some teams problems. The athleticism is going to give some teams problems. It's going to be a fun year. And the Cougs might go under the radar this year. No one is picking them to go as far as, especially last year's team, being number one team and all those kind of predictions. But this team is different than last year's team. And we haven't touched on a lot of, Coach Sampson's comments that he said, last year's team did not get better month to month. Last year's team come March was not a typical Coach Sampson UH basketball team. They were not playing their best basketball. I don't believe that's going to be the case this year.
Those were comments that he mentioned prior to the season. It was in was it John Rothstein's interview that he did with CBS Sports? But it interesting comments when he mentioned it earlier in the season. And again, going back to what we discussed earlier in the show, certainly seems like he's very high on this particular group of players. And again, barely game one, more exciting opportunity for the potential that this team can have, the seeding that they have. Their next game is on Saturday against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. It'll be interesting to see who steps up, how they step up offensively, whether it's Damian Dunn, Emmanuel Sharp, someone else rises, and in particular, how the defense carries over. Because if they can hold Corpus Christi to the same level of performance, it's going to be really hard to hold them to just 31 points again, to that level of dominance. That's going to really continue to only increase that optimism with how defensively really, really good this team looks to be after one game.
I think holding the team under to like 50 or so is great. 31 is ridiculously, great. In Corpus Christi, I'm not sure who they got coming back, but the Cougs are better than them, and they'll get after them defensively and score in transition and cause them problems. I'm looking forward to seeing which Cougs step up. Might be someone else differently, offensively on Saturday, and then they got a game on Monday. So 3 games in what was it, 8 days. So it's a quick turnaround. But looking forward to this is a good team, and fans going to enjoy watching this year's Cougs team play. And I'm really looking forward to the game against Xavier on the road and the game against A&M on December 16th.
Toyota Center.
At Toyota Center, a little bit further down the street from where I am right now.
I'd be curious to see what the turnout of that game is for UH fans in an NBA-sized venue. What they're able to.
I've heard that the lower bowl is almost sold out, so they're about to open up everything else up top.
How many would be UH fans? How many would be Texas A&M fans? That'll be interesting to see.
It was a good number of because I think they got each of the 4 schools participating for the doubleheader have a certain allotment, but I have heard that the Coug fans have come through strong so far.
That's awesome to hear. And that's pretty much going to do it for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian Family. Of course, once again, the final score from Monday's season opener, Houston throttles ULM 84-31. Big thank you to the Saxenian Family for being a primary sponsor in today's episode. Of course, thank you to Star Pizza for being our secondary sponsor. My name is Andy Yanez. You guys can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Ayanez_5. Kris, the floor is yours. Where could people find you? And then Ayan, you'll close us out.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you guys for leading the show while I was doing post game. Follow me on Houston Roundbar Review on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and YouTube, of course, as well. I really enjoy being part of Let's Rage Coogs. Looking forward to this season. Should be a fun one. Should be exciting. Let's keep following me. And thank you, everybody. We got a busy day on Saturday, basketball and football. So come back to Let's Rage Coogs and let's have fun.
You can follow me on all social media platforms like the shows on the screen below at Dayon Dunlap. And like both old gentlemen just said, we appreciate all your continuous support. And of course, it's a new season for the basketball, but as we continue to keep going and close out these last few games for football and continue on for basketball, we want you guys to continue to Let's Rage after these games. And can't end the episode without saying, let's go Cougs.